Whoever buys this ranch gets a servant free. The sheriff laughed and pointed at the heavy girl. The sky over Dry Creek darkens like a bruise, and the courthouse square holds its breath. Clara Hayes stands in a gray dress that bites her ribs, palms damp, while whispers tally her father's debts as if they were hymns. Sheriff Amos Holt slaps the auction ledger and laughs. Whoever buys Hayes Ranch gets a servant free, he says, pointing at the heavy girl as though she were a shovel. Dust jumps. Someone snickers about feed. A bell clangs at noon, then keeps ringing in her blood. A stranger steps from the shade, taller than the doorframe he clears, a pale scar like lightning down one cheek. Elias Warren doesn't smile or spit or trade jokes. He looks at Clara as rain begins to prickle the heat, and for a second she thinks he sees the years she carried this land alone. Bidding starts dirty and fast. Men throw numbers like stones. A hand waves a greasy bill. 400. Someone calls. Holt's grin widens. Do I hear 5? The stranger lifts 2 fingers. 500. Silence lands. Boots scuff. A woman mutters that he'll be sorry by sundown. Holt slams the book. Sold. Clara's mouth tastes of iron. Is this a rescue or another leash? The laughter that rises behind her sounds like coyotes cornering a calf. Elias speaks at last, voice low, unreadable. Wagon. He offers nothing else, not pity, not triumph, not claim. They pass the gallows post, bleached as bone, and the sky splits with a far-off crack. A folded scrap flutters from Holt's ledger, carried on a gust, skittering after their wheels. Clara stares at it, a torn receipt stamped with a name she thought buried with her mother. Why is that here? Who put it there? And why did the sheriff smile when he saw her look? Rain hardens into a sheet, turning the road from Dry Creek to clay. Elias Warren keeps the reins tight, gaze forward, hat brim dripping. Beside him, Clara Hayes locks her hands until her knuckles pale. Behind them, the courthouse dissolves, yet Sheriff Amos Holt's laugh rides the wind. Whoever buys Hayes Ranch gets a servant free. The sentence grinds inside her ribs. She counts breaths and fights the taste of dust and shame. She is 24, the dress biting her sides where seams have been let out, and let out again. Her mother's songs ended with fever when Clara was small. Her father filled the quiet with promises he could not keep. Debts crept through every gate until neighbors looked away to save themselves. Pity curdled into jokes, whispered behind hands. When the well spat rust and the last calf folded, men with smiles brought ledgers and condolences. Today, those ledgers closed in her name. A ridge rises. From the top, she sees the country under a bruise-colored sky. Gullies clawed deep, grass the color of rope, a windmill leaning like a drunk. The wagon jolts through a wash, and Elias shifts to take the jolt without touching her. That small courtesy unsettles her more than cruelty would. He had lifted 2 fingers in town and paid $500 for a failing ranch and a woman the crowd treated as a bargain insult. His silence is not warmth. It is armor. They reach the gate first. The sign hanging by one chain, paint peeling to the ghost of letters. Beyond it, the yard sprawls tired and crooked. Fences gapped, the porch tipped, a shutter banging and stopping and banging again. Rain ticks on the boards like nails. Clara swallows hard. She ate yesterday morning and nothing since. Elias halts the team under a cottonwood that shakes 100 small coins of water. He studies the yard with a veteran's caution, weighing angles, measuring time against the weather. House first, he says at last. Air it. Buckets under leaks. No fire until the flue draws. Spare room tonight. The front is not fit. His voice holds neither insult nor comfort, only steps arranged for survival. Rumor said he'd been a soldier a decade and a drifter since, and the fact sits in the calm way he orders weather. He takes a coil of rope and a hammer and goes to the barn as if the storm were merely scheduled. Relief warms her. She resents needing it and goes inside. The door sighs on tired hinges. Mildew veils the corners. A map of brown flowers stains the ceiling where rain has chewed for years. The stove door hangs warped. Mice found the flour tin and left a pale fan on the counter. Clara stares a moment, then finds a broom with flared bristles. Motion steadies thought. She opens what windows will move and pries others with a knife until rain-washed air shouldered through the room. Sweep, lift, haul, breathe, each action a plank laid under her feet. Hammer strokes answer from the barn. Slow, exact, spaced like counting. The rhythm steadies her and prods questions she cannot ask. Where did he earn that scar? Why no mockery in his eyes? What did he really buy? She scrubs the stove with sand until black crust yields and dull iron shows. Her hands sting. Her back complains. She takes both as proof she still occupies herself. Not just a line in a ledger. The shame that clung in town begins to loosen like wet ash. By midday, the kitchen looks less like abandonment and more like fatigue. She finds buckets beneath the sink, rims dented but sound, pumps until water runs clear, and washes the counters that have forgotten soap. From the window she watches Elias set the broken barn door on trestles, remove split planks, measure and cut. He never glances at the house. He works as if talk wastes tools. That steadiness calms her more than kind words ever did. Perhaps because it asks nothing she cannot give. Hunger flares again. She checks the larder, finds a heel of bread hard as a hammer, and a small piece of salt pork wrapped in cloth. She slices thin, boils long, and lets steam drive damp from the corners. The smell raises memories of better winters and drops a stone through her throat. She eats slowly, saving half, determined not to stagger. Food clears noise. A plan takes shape. Front room next. Quilts to the rail. Pans beneath confirmed drips. Floorboards scrubbed with lye when the stove draws right. The carpet along the parlor wall has bloomed into fur. She drags it outside inch by inch, coughing when spores lift. Quilts shake and release gray ghosts into the wet breeze. In a drawer she finds her mother's tin of buttons, bone, pearl, horn, and a single blue glass circle that once flashed on a Sunday dress. Her throat tightens. She counts to 10, snaps the lid shut, and places the tin high. Memory can wait. The floor cannot. She scrubs until her hands tremble with honest effort. By late afternoon, the barn door hangs straight, latch true, hinge oiled. The tarp rides the roof like a second skin. Elias ties the last knot and tests it twice. Scars write history down his cheek and across one knuckle. If he notices her watching, he gives no sign. The yard looks less defeated, not from miracles but from hours stacked with patience. Rumor will arrive faster than wagons by morning, yet the place itself has already learned a new language. Do one necessary thing, then another. She banks the fire small, eats the rest of the pork, and sets a plate aside without quite admitting for whom. She spreads a quilt in the spare room where the walls are sound and the window catches a slice of washed sky. Boots by the door, palms on her knees, she counts the ache in her body like coins. It is expensive, yet it buys something that pride can use. She is owned today, but work remains hers to direct within the lines given. That narrow truth steadies her heart. Elias's footfalls cross the porch. Tools knock softly as he stows them. He does not enter. Boundaries rescue her from flinch. Through the wall she hears a low murmur that could be for the horses while he checks tack. Men who tend animals gently rarely strike for sport. She files the observation beside others. He bought without boasting, arranged tasks that kept them alive, and watched without sneer. None of it is affection. All of it is better than contempt. She lets her spine loosen against the mattress. Cracks map old water paths across the ceiling. As a girl she traced shapes there and named constellations from an almanac left by a traveling preacher. Tonight she names intentions. Clean, mend, tally stores, learn the fence line, and keep records better than her father ever did. The town prized her like rope. Elias did not laugh. Somewhere between those facts lies a space where dignity might take root if she feeds it with competence and time. Outside, frogs start their thin chorus in the ditch. Wind freshens and patters against the tarp. The storm holds the house like a heavy hand. Yet inside the rooms breathe for the first time in months. Clara closes her eyes. The last sound before sleep is not thunder or Holt's echoing laugh. It is the patient pace of a man stacking salvaged boards in a dry corner. So nothing is wasted. She counts the knocks the way a seamstress counts stitches, believing in small accumulations. Tomorrow she will keep going. Tonight she lets hope be quiet and Morning smells of wet earth and lie. Clara wakes before the rooster finds its voice in the ditch. Wrists sore, shoulders hot, palms wrapped in torn cloth. She builds a small flame and tests the drawer, keeping the fire modest so smoke won't claw her lungs. The yard has turned to ruts and mirrors, puddles holding a pale ribbon of sky between thinning clouds. Elias moves outside with a steady cadence, crossing from the barn to the neat stacks of lumber. He's sorted by lantern light. He doesn't call her name or ask how she slept. He measures the day like a carpenter measures a beam, by what will bear weight. She starts with the hallway where mildew kept a kingdom. Soap turns green to grey foam and runs in threads across warped boards. The rag chews her hands raw. Blisters rise under cloth and argue with every push. She drags 2 scuffed chairs into light, beats cushions until dust breaks like moths, and stacks cracked plates by size to judge what can be saved. The window refuses to lift until she leverages it with a butter knife. A draft slips in and trades wet air for air that smells faintly of sage. She finds the button tin, closes it before memory spills, and places it high where practical hands rule. Hunger arrives early and rudely. She waves it off with boiled water, carries the pail to fill again, and studies her palms while the pump groans. Angry bubbles crowd beneath the skin where blisters will rip by sundown. The sight earns a quick, private grin. Town mouths made a sport of saying her body proved idleness. These hands say otherwise. They have turned soil, dragged stones, and shouldered a father's ledgers through doors that closed. She brings the water inside and keeps the rhythm. Scrub, rinse, wring, breathe. Outside, Elias tests a hinge, then the plank beneath it, never trusting one fix to hold without its neighbors. He glances toward the porch once, not at her, but at the open windows, reading whether cross breezes are doing what he intended. He wedges a shutter so the wind won't bang it loose and returns to his work without remark. The restraint saves her from shrinking. A man who lets quiet carry his meaning might make room for respect. By noon, the hallway carries a dull honesty. Clara moves to the pantry, scrapes shelves, sweeps mouse seeds, and washes jars to line in rows that look like promise. Her stomach hollows until standing steals balance. Yesterday's pork is gone. The bread heel dissolved into steam and crumbs. She braces an elbow on the frame and counts from 1 to 20. The room tilts anyway. Stubbornness is the one possession no sheriff can auction. So she tries another shelf, then another, until the mop handle grows into a long black reed, and the floor swims away. Light narrows to coins. The world shrugs and lets her slide. She hears herself whisper a prayer without words, and then hears nothing except a faint tapping, like rain far from the roof. The floor meets her cheek, cool through grime. Soap turns metallic. Time loosens its grip until footsteps find her, and strong arms lift her as if she were a plank to be set true. Elias carries her without strain. The hallway passes in slices. The tin on its high shelf, a bucket steady beneath a leak, a neat row of jars ready for use. His shirt smells of horse and clean sweat, not whiskey. He sets her on a narrow bed in a room that has been mended. Fresh boards over rot, dry quilts, a window chocked open to a rinsed day. His voice is low and practical. He leaves, returns with a small loaf wrapped in cloth, and a kettle that ticks as it cools. He breaks the bread cleanly, pours water into a tin cup, and offers both with his palms steady. Eat. She wants to refuse. Pride warns that if she accepts, she owes. Pride also knows a body without fuel fails its duty. She tears a piece and lays it on her tongue. The chew slow, the swallow harder than it should be. Water follows, cool over heat, and her stomach wakes like a child roused too fast. Tears arrive with no display, only the body admitting a limit. She turns her face, trying to hide what cannot be hidden. He neither looks away nor stares. He watches color step back into her cheeks as if he were gauging a fire. Eat, he says again, tone unchanged, and she obeys until breath matches the tick of the kettle, and the light steadies at the window. He gathers the cup, scans corners for damp, checks the window brace, and sets the kettle where heat won't warp its bottom. Sleep a while, he adds. Not soft, not hard. Fence work after the sun dries the low ground. The word work comes like a small bell rung in a fog. She nods. When he steps out, shame tries to creep in, wearing Sheriff Holt's grin. Yet bread holds its ground, and water quiets the noise in her ears. Something tight inside her loosens under a simpler grammar. Not pity, fuel. A thought rises tender as green after drought. Reflect on a time someone saw your worth when you could not, and how that sight changed your road. Memory answers with a school teacher who slipped her a slate after her father sold the first, a neighbor who left eggs by the gate during frost, the blacksmith who corrected her stance when he saw a lift would tear her shoulder. Those moments bent her days toward survival. This moment might do more. She sleeps an hour and wakes to a thinner cloud deck and a pale beam of sun on the quilt's indigo triangles. Strength returns in measured sips. She sits up slowly, tests her legs, and finds the ground under them. She smooths the seam of the quilt, breathes once for courage, and rises. Afternoon leans toward brightness. Mud clutches the yard in slick fists, but wind tugs at the puddles until skins crinkle. Clara wrings the rag one last time, cleans the baseboard that mocked her earlier, and sets the bucket outside to drain. She plets her hair tight, wraps her palms fresh, and steps to the porch where Elias waits, with 2 pairs of gloves and a coil of new wire. He hands her the smaller gloves. They are not fancy, only whole. Wholeness feels like respect measured in leather and stitches. They walk the fence line that runs along a shallow draw. Posts lean at angles that suggest surrender. Sage crowds the bottom wire. A section near the cottonwoods lies flat, where cattle pressed during the last thirsty week. Elias speaks little, explaining only what holds. Set a post deep, tamp in stages, let the grain guide your swing, stretch wire until it sings, not screams. He shows a splice honest hands make, neat as a promise. She listens and shelves each step, where her mind keeps new tools. They work in paired motion. He drives a post, she shovels fill. He tamps, she checks plumb by eye, and nudges a breath's width. Sun lifts the scent of grass, not dead after all. Their cuffs darken, boots take mud, sweat runs cool and clean down her neck. When he threads new wire through a staple and steps toward her, their hands brush. The contact is small, not romance, yet not nothing. It says, yes, you belong inside this work. 3 posts stand straight before shadows lengthen to blue. Birds return to the cottonwoods and argue about worms and wind. Clara's muscles hum like a plucked string, low and satisfied. She leans on the last post and allows one private smile. If the town could see her now, sweat slick and steady, it would write fresh jokes. Let it. The fence stands where talk cannot. She wipes her brow with her wrist and meets Elias's gaze for the length of a breath. Approval passes between them without changing his face. They coil leftover wire, carry tools back, and stack them under the shelter. He checks the gate latch twice. She hangs the rag to dry and looks at the kitchen with its cleared counter and lined jars. Hunger tugs again, gentler. She slices 2 thin pieces from a small loaf, found in a tin, and leaves one on a plate by habit. Born today. Outside, light turns to pewter, and a breezy hush replaces thunder. When they finally sit, not together but near, the quiet between them holds like a well-tied rope. Her blisters throb. She does not resent the pain. It speaks. It says, you chose well. Work waits. Rest waits. Choose right and live. She looks toward the room that witnessed her collapse, and sees not failure, but a threshold crossed. Tomorrow she will wake early, eat before the world tilts, and mend another stretch. If anyone asks what changed, she will not offer poetry. She will answer with 4 small things placed in order: bread, water, wire, and trust. Sun climbs out of the storm like a tired horse, dragging pale light across the yard, while puddles shrink to mirrors. Clara knots a scarf and shoulders open the barn door, breath hitching at the sour slap of manure, damp straw, old rot, and lie. Spiders lace the rafters. One skitters over her temple and vanishes behind an iron hook. Disgust can ride along, she tells herself, but it cannot steer. Elias checks a cinch, tests a hinge, and moves with the paired economy of someone who learned the price of waste. Clara takes a shovel and a fork and begins peeling a winter's worth of filth from the stalls. Layers slough like sodden pages. Every heave stings her palms through fresh wraps. Yet the sting means effort counts. Flies rise in black commas, drone around her head, settle on the handle, lift again when she snaps a wrist. She drags the first load to the doorway, tips it into the wheelbarrow, and leans to push. Mud grips the wheel and argues with each inch. She plants her feet and drives. The load lurches, halts, lurches again, then stops with a surly shudder. Elias steps from the corral, hat tipped back so the scar along his cheek turns to a pale bolt. He takes in the barrow, the sweat darkening her collar, the green haze of flies, and offers no joke, no lecture, only a nod. He moves opposite her, sets both hands on the iron, and they push together, stride matched without talk. The wheel climbs the slight bank toward the pit. Silence wears like an old coat. Their shoes make soft sounds that say enough. His knuckles brush hers at the handles. She doesn't flinch. Her shoulder bumps his arm at the lip. He doesn't lean away. The barn exhales as waste leaves. A mouse streaks for a hole beneath the feed bin. Clara laughs once, surprised by the clean sound, and it travels the aisle like a bird seeking rafters. Elias's mouth twitches toward a smile that might exist someday. By midday, 3 stalls stand nearly clean. Sun reaches deep and sketches edges around tools and rope. Clara pries rust from a curry comb, drops it in a pail, and scrubs a trough with straw and hot water until iron shows beneath brown bloom. Straw clings to her forearms. Sweat traces her spine. Motion becomes a creed stronger than any words spoken over her. Another barrow load sticks in a rut. She plants her boots and pushes. The wheel lifts an inch, then sinks like a stubborn mule. Elias's shadow covers the handles. He sets his palms beside hers, warmth passing through leather, and on the next drive, the barrow rises cleanly and rolls. They pass beneath the cottonwood, scattering coins of light over their sleeves. At the pit, he tips, rakes, and taps the rim to knock free clots. "We'll brace that beam before night," he says, glancing toward the loft. She nods, grateful for instructions that treat her as part of the plan. At the doorway, she rests with a handkerchief, letting heavy stall air trade places with the faint sweetness of sun on wet earth. His voice arrives while he rewinds cracked leather. "My mother died bonded," he says, eyes on the rack. He speaks like a man correcting a ledger, not begging sympathy. "Cooked for a cattleman. Winter fever. Promises light as straw. No stone." He tightens the strap and tests it with a small pull. Clara lets the quiet hold. The words find footing and stand. They lift the barrow and push. Wind lifts and lays the cottonwood leaves in one bright shiver. She thinks of her mother's tin of buttons, a blue glass circle that flashed on Sundays, and the day fever ended kitchen songs. Grief tilts the world, then steadies under iron handle. "I'm sorry," she says, plain as a nail tapped true. He nods once. "You don't owe saying." A beat passes. "I owed learning what to build." He looks up at the snug tarps he sealed at dawn. "So I choose posts and roofs, and people who show up." They finish the worst stall, scrub the corner where old hay fused to muck, and spread clean straw thin as a new sheet. A bay gelding in the next pen flicks an ear and noses the bedding. The courtesy from the muscle warms. She wipes her hands, flexes her fingers, and sees skin thickening into ridges. Callus stings during birth, then steadies the grip. She traces an edge with a thumb, and feels pride that isn't vanity but proof earned in tiny squares. Outside, fences stand straighter along the draw, wire catching sunlight in thin cords. The path to the porch no longer swallows steps. Earlier she tossed brush into piles and smoothed ruts while water receded. A patch by the stoop waits for seed. She has no seed yet, only intention, though intention stands taller now that the yard answers with order. Voices drift from the road, a wagon rattling toward Dry Creek. A man telling a joke, half mean, half bored. Sound fades. Near mid-afternoon they haul the last heavy barrow. Sweat soaks both shirts. Her scarf holds grit, hay needles and a thread of silk shining across the knot like silver wire. She unties it, shakes out the strands, and twists the cloth back tight. The sky clears by degrees while a low band of cloud lingers like a thought that will not leave. They turn to the tidy chaos of tools and set things in an order that will survive the next storm. Forks, teeth up, rope coiled, oil can capped, nails sorted into a coffee tin, whose faded label still promises sweetness. Two riders slow at the far fence. One cups his hand and calls something about scandal, voice stretched by the odd music cruelty makes in idle men. The other laughs too loudly and spits. Elias doesn't turn. He lifts the last shovel, checks the edge, and slots it home. Clara's throat tightens despite resolve. Shame remembers the square, and tries to sit down. She inhales through her nose and rolls her shoulders. Work speaks louder. When the riders meet indifference, noise thins. They kick on, likely to haul livelier tales to the saloon. Wind carries sage and damp soil into the doorway, lighter than any breath since the sky first went black. Clara leans the broom and looks down the line of stalls, surprised by the quiet beauty an honest sweep can coax from rough boards. Elias hands her the canteen. The water is warm, yet it tastes like a promise held steady. She drinks and passes it back. Think of someone who helped without judgment. She says not to fish for comfort, but to anchor her own thinking, and how to pay that forward. The words settle like seed in furrow. She pictures the school teacher who slipped her a slate when coins were short, the blacksmith who taught her to lift with legs, the neighbor who left eggs when the hens went silent, and a man who said, "Eat without pity," and pushed with her instead of dragging her aside. Her chest loose, they close the doors and step into a yard the color of straw and pearl, ground no longer treacherous. A bird rises from the cottonwood with a twig, flying toward a nest it will reinforce until eggs arrive. Songs follow, then wing. She rubs her palms and admires the rough places hardening into shields. A tool respect. Elias flips the wheelbarrow, so rain can't fill the tray, coils spare wire, and glances from the house to her. An unspoken question about what remains. They walk the fence together, not speaking. Wire hums in the wind. Honest music. At the far corner, a loose staple blinks in late light. He sets it with a sure tap while she holds the line steady. When he straightens, he meets her eyes for a breath, and gives that same small nod from morning, only warmer now as if the angle had shifted by a degree that matters. Toward evening, clouds stack like books far off. Caution without threat. The place smells of sap and iron instead of sour. She thinks of tomorrow's tasks. Mend the porch rail, clear thistle near the well, hunt the shed for seed that might still wake. Then lets the list drift, and enjoys walking through a space that no longer looks beaten. If Dry Creek whispers, let it. Here the steps lead to work and work to choice. On the porch she pauses with a palm on the post, feeling grain where Elias planed away a splinter at noon. The breeze moves through her hair like slow forgiveness. She is not remade by purchase, not improved by laughter's lash, but sharpened by labor and steadied by a partner who lifts where lifting matters. The barn behind them holds clean straw and tools in rows. The field beyond holds lines ready for seed. Her body holds strength that belongs to her. In the quiet she lets a vow take shape as sure as a knot. Keep showing up. Keep choosing build over break. Keep paying forward what was given without price. Storm clouds still loiter on the horizon, yet the day closes with a thought she can live by. Some bonds rust and fall when two people lean into the same handle and push the same load toward light. Noon presses on the yard, squeezing brightness into damp ground until puddles shrink to dark ovals. Clara pulls thistles by the well and stacks thorny stalks in a crate, so fresh shoots won't steal water from the patch reserved for seed. New skin thickens across her palms and burns when sweat finds the tender places. A gust carries road dust. A horse snorts beyond the cottonwood. She straightens, Sheriff Amos Holt rides through the open gate without a knock. Two deputies drifting behind like burrs, faces arranged for sport. Elias steps from the barn with a coil of rope and an unraidable face. He sets the coil down, walks forward without hurry, and stops between the riders and the porch. Holt surveys the yard as if tallying furniture. His gaze lands on Clara and lingers, the look of a thumb pressing a bruise. Dry Creek's been loud, he drawls. Folks wonder how fast supplies vanish when there's a big appetite under this roof. Maybe you need help counting your stores. A gloved finger points toward the kitchen window, as though inventory lived behind glass instead of in hands that work. Clara's jaw locks. Heat climbs her neck, harsh as stove iron. She sets the crate down with more care than she feels, and wipes her wrists, not wanting Straw to hand him a joke. Elias doesn't look at her. He looks at Holt, shoulders straight as the fence they set 2 days ago. State your business, he says, voice even. Business? Holt chuckles. A public matter. People ask about propriety. A servant promised at the auction can't eat a man out of his pantry. Folks think you've been robbed blind and don't know it. Why? I could swear that dress fits tighter already. The insult lands like a slap. Clara steps toward the gate before she understands the motion. Leaving becomes reflex, the way a frightened mare bolts when fire runs through ground. She reaches the porch rail and curls her fingers around the smooth wood. Elias planed. Breath refuses to listen. Shame swells until sight blurs at the edges. Elias moves a half-pace forward, enough to block Holt's aim. Leave my land. The words carry no shout. Restraint gives them iron. One deputy slides a look toward the other. Holt's smile thins. You forget yourself, mister. The sheriff says. Bonded labor has conditions. A woman like that will eat you out of this valley. I'm doing you a favor warning you before winter. I said leave, Elias answered. He doesn't blink. Holt's grin cracks. I can come back with papers and 10 men. Think on it. He pivots the bay, dust flicking Clara's hem. As he passes, he tips his hat toward her, a parody of courtesy. Keep your sticky fingers off the jar, sweetheart. The town's eyes are not blind. Laughter trails them to the road, thin and mean, shrinking with distance like a tin rattled behind a wagon. Silence returns, heavy as humidity before lightning. Clara releases the rail and takes 2 steps toward the far edge of the yard. If she goes now, no one will be dragged into scorn. She can spare him the jokes thrown at his back and the threats folded in legal words. Footsteps cross the porch. Careful. Elias stops beside her, not too near. You are not a burden. The sentence drops like a weight onto a moving cart, halting it before the load tips. She keeps her eyes on the fence line. He's the law, she manages. If I leave, you won't have to fight the town. You're part of this work, he says. He doesn't decide our days. The tone matches the one he used on crooked posts and loose hinges. Warmth would undo her. Steadiness saves her. Heat in her throat turns into something else. Not relief. Recognition. A thought opens. Recall a time you felt worthless, and imagine how it would feel to be defended instead. Memory answers with a school teacher who slipped her a slate when coins were short. A neighbor who set eggs on a step without knocking. A blacksmith who corrected her stance so lifting would not tear muscle. Each act built a bridge over a hard day. This one builds a road. Elias lifts his chin toward the patch beside the porch. Seed, he says. Clouds will return by evening. If we plant now, moisture will carry into the soil. He fetches burlap, a hoe and a rake, kneels and tests the looseness of the ground. She follows, wrists still shaking, calmer as work asserts its logic, and lays a boundary around them that a rumor cannot cross. They mark rows with the hoe, using a string between pegs so lines run true. Elias shows how deep to strike for beans, how shallow for lettuce, and why spacing keeps roots from stealing each other's drink. Facts fall into the air the way rain falls into dust, unavoidable and cleansing. Clara measures seed into her palm, feels tiny weights, lets them drop at careful intervals, and draws a light veil across the surface with the rake's teeth. Thunder murmurs from far hills, a reminder that judgment gathers even when hands are clean. The sound travels along the drawers and loses force at the cottonwood, as if the old tree were a hymn book, lowering a harsh note. Elias works beside her in unhurried rhythm. His scar pales when light shifts. Sweat gathers at his brow, he ignores. She ties her scarf tighter and keeps going, the scarf a small flag for perseverance, rather than apology. The garden takes shape. 3 long rows for beans, 2 for squash, narrow bands for carrots and beets, a strip for greens closest to the porch, so she can cut leaves during rain. They set stakes at the head of each line to hold labels later. She wheels compost to the pit, empties weeds, and returns to crumble clods, until the soil turns fine and dark. Air smells of iron and hope. Warm drops arrive, curious scouts of a shower. They cover the seed sack with burlap and keep their pace. Elias packs the path between rows with his boot, so water won't run wild. Clara presses both palms to the earth at the end of the last line, and whispers a promise not spoken aloud. Grow if you can, and I will keep you safe. She stands and looks across the yard. Fences hold straight along the draw. The barn door shuts true. The porch rail gleams where plane and oil brought grain to shine. They carry tools to the lean-to and set them where rain can't find metal. Elias checks the latch, then looks toward the road, measuring whether Holt will return before dusk. He will try again, he says. Clara nods. He liked the show. Elias's gaze comes back to her. He enjoys power. That is not the same as being right. She drinks from the canteen and passes it back. Breath has steadied. Pride sits beside fear, smaller yet brighter. Thank you, she says. He ties the sack, slings it over a peg, and answers with a short nod that bends into an almost smile before it vanishes. The almost is enough, because he has already given the thing that matters. A line drawn where she stands beside him, not behind. Rain steadies, stippling soil with small signatures. They watch from the eave. The garden drinks. The cottonwood shine. Wind carries a rumor from the saloon. Men repeating the sheriff's tale and polishing each line, until it throws sparks. Clara's stomach tightens, then opens. Tomorrow will bring rows to weed, a scare line to string, brush to lay where runoff might bite, and a walk along the fence for new trouble. If law rides in with paper and threat, they will meet it with clear eyes and joined hands. Evening lower. Elias lights a lamp and sets it near the window, throwing a square of warm color onto the wet yard. Clara thinks of a ledger she will keep for flour, beans, candles, oil, tools, blankets, nails and seed, a record no whisper can contradict. She pictures lines aligned like the garden, each entry proof that order multiplied inside walls once given up for lost. Her hands stop shaking. Strength has moved inward and outward, into muscle and ground alike. The thunder becomes a distant drum that the earth can carry without breaking. They eat in the quiet that follows labor. Bread, beans from the last sack, a slice of salt pork thin enough to stretch taste without greed. Elias says little. He glances at her plate only to judge whether the meal matches the work. She meets his eyes long enough to answer with a nod. Enough. He relaxes a fraction. Tins are washed in collected rainwater and set to dry by the open window, where lamplight prints an amber rectangle on the sill. Beyond the fence, a fox trots along the draw, pauses to test the wind, then slips into the brush. Lamplight paints a narrow path down the steps, a soft invitation toward tomorrow. Clara closes the door against the damp and listens to the garden take rain like breath. Fear lingers. Gossip travels faster than wagons, but resolve rises higher and whole. She ties her scarf to a peg, smooths its edge, and lets the fabric become a vow. Show up, build, refuse, shame its seat. Thunder rolls one last time. Far off, a closing door. Night settles. The air smells of wet iron and leaf. Elias trims the lamp and sets it low. Dawn, he says, meaning they will start again before the birds begin. She nods. Dawn, The word sits sure on her tongue. Tomorrow they will stretch a line for vines and set labels at the stakes. Tomorrow she will carry her worth in both hands, and no laughter will shake it loose. Morning opens clear and sharp, the valley scrubbed by recent rain until every blade shows a narrow edge of light. Clara leads the bay gelding from his stall with a loose loop of rope, palm turned up so he smells calm instead of command. Her hands, once ribboned with blisters, now hold steady weight and move with patient rhythm learned through days that did not ask for speeches. At the threshold, she waits until the horse's ears flick forward and the horse lowers his head. Then she steps into the yard without tugging. Elias stands at the gate, hat brim shading a scar that looks almost pale in the crisp sun, and says nothing because nothing is needed. She circles the corral, breathing slow, letting the gelding match her cadence, stopping when he stops, walking when he walks, teaching trust with small, repeatable choices. She rubs his neck, unknots the rope, and guides him to a patch of grass glossy as oiled leather. "Good," Elias says at last, the single word smooth as a planed board. They move to the porch where time and weather had chewed the rail. He sets a plank on sawhorses, marks with a carpenter's pencil and hands her the plane. She draws it with even pressure, shaving thin curls that fall like pale ribbons. He positions a brace, they lift the new piece into place, and she holds while he drives nails, 3 exact blows per head, no wasted swing. "Thank you," he says, not as flattery, simply as a record. Wind off the draw carries a faint hum from the tight wire. Elias leans on the post, gaze on the far ridge. "I fought in the war," he says finally, the confession plain as if he were naming a tool. "Years of making holes. After the end I kept walking through places that felt hollow. The first night I set a fence post straight. I slept." Clara keeps her eyes on the rail because the truth between them feels fragile and sturdy at once. "You wanted to build," she says. He nods. "Wanted to see lines hold." Afternoon brings roof work. The tarp that kept storms from chewing the rafters comes down, folded tight. Tin sheets go up, edges bright as coins. She climbs the ladder with nails tucked in her sleeve and passes what he needs before he asks. A gust tries to steal a panel. She plants both feet and braces, grinning despite herself. Elias catches the look and lets out a short laugh, surprised and quick. She laughs too, not carefully, a sound she has not heard from her mouth in years. By dusk, the roof sits true. They carry tools down, stack them carefully, and walk the fence to listen for a sour note that would mean slack wire. Everything sings low and even. The cottonwood throws long bands of shade across the yard. Clara catches her reflection in a window cleaned 2 days earlier, and pauses. The face is the same one she carried through the square, yet the set of the mouth has changed, and the eyes hold steadiness that owes nothing to anyone's permission. Inside, the garden shows green stitches through brown, beans reaching for string, lettuce making a thin frill, squash blossoms opening like small suns. The barn smells of clean straw and oiled hinges. The house breathes without mold. After supper of bread, boiled beans and a sliver of cheese bartered for a quick horseshoe, Elias sharpens the plain iron while she oils the hinges that still complain. The lamp throws a warm square on the table. A wagon rattles. Voices low, the tone of men tasting a room. The sound fades, then lifts again as wind carries words from town. Meeting, disgrace, arrangement. She dries the hinge and breathes once so the thought does not own her. In the morning, work continues because the noise of work answers. 2 days slide by with bright hours and a hanging rim of cloud. Seedlings push higher. She strings a line for beans so vines can climb without wasting strength. Elias hauls boards from a neighbor who traded lumber for help mending a chute. At noon, he returns with extra nails and a folded note from the storekeeper. The scrawl names a meeting called for Saturday. Men of Dry Creek intend to visit and correct what they call a scandal. Her breath thins, then returns strong. The garden, the roof, the straight fence, the repaired rail, the clean barn. None of that will matter to people who prefer order that keeps certain souls small. She looks toward the yard and refuses to shrink. "We will meet them here," she says quietly. We will stand where we planted. Elias studies her for a full beat and gives a single sure nod. Then we make the place ready. They gather stones from the drawer and spread them in a clean band between the gate and the porch. Each shovel stroke answers a whisper with grit. Elias stakes a post by the garden and hangs a tin dipper so any visitor can drink without stepping inside. Clara copies their stores into a new ledger. Script careful, columns straight, count exact because numbers that live on paper cannot be bullied by a shout. Wind brings the smell of distant rain, then sets it down elsewhere. In late light she returns to the corral. The gelding waits at the rail, breath slow and ears forward. She sets a palm near his jaw and feels velvet warm. He follows without fuss, matching her through a figure eight, backing when she lowers her shoulders, walking on when she lifts her chin. Elias leans on the top rail and says, "That's it," in a tone that makes the praise feel like a tool fitted to her. "You kept yourself small when fear barked. You're larger now and steady. Horses notice." She strokes the gelding's neck and swallows a quick heat that is not shame. It is pride trimmed to the right size. Above them the sky holds towering clouds, white at the crowns and iron at the cores. Lightning murmurs along the far horizon, too distant to trouble the roof yet near enough to remind them that weather, like talk, builds far away and then arrives all at once. They bank the stove, rinse the tin plates and set the lamp low. Before sleep, Clara stands in the doorway and listens to a ranch that answers more to choices than to debt. The garden breathes, the barn beams settle, the wire sings softly. Morning returns bright again. She mends a tear in her dress with blue thread from her mother's tin, and feels the old ache arrive and pass. On the porch, Elias lays out screws, a square and 2 pieces of trim for the post. They fit the angles. Laugh once when a dog from up the road wanders through and steals a fallen shaving like a prize, and finish the corner in a clean line that pleases the eye from every approach. A rider appears on the ridge and turns his horse so the sun flashes on a badge pinned to a vest. He watches a while and then disappears. By noon, clouds stack higher. The air tastes metallic as if a storm licks its teeth. Clara carries a bucket to the rows and kneels to pinch weeds before their roots grip. Leaves cool her knuckles. New shoots stand brave and foolish. She shades them with small sticks so hail, if it comes, will find something else first. Elias studies the latch and tightens the screws until each seat feels final. "Whatever rides in on Saturday," he says, "we answer as builders." She nods. As partners, the word lands and stays. It does not erase fear, but it pushes fear aside to make room for forward motion. She lifts her face to the wind and feels rain dust the air. The first drops darken the soil in neat coins, and the garden, stubborn and young, drinks. Tonight, clouds stack over Dry Creek like anvils as wagons grind through the gate. Men climb down, hats low, boots ticking on the stones. Clara lay to keep mud from swallowing steps. Sheriff Amos Holt rides at their front, councilmen beside him with rolled papers like short clubs. Neighbors line the fence, hungry for spectacle. The cottonwood shivers, a green chandelier rattled by wind. Elias stands on the porch with empty hands, scar pale against windburned skin. He does not reach for a rifle. He watches like a man measuring the weather. Clara wipes her palms on her skirt and steps beside him. Seedlings green the garden behind her, straight rows she will not abandon. The barn door hangs true. She lifts her chin. Holt reins the bay close. Dry Creek Council convened. He calls. "We find a breach of propriety. A woman sold as bound labor is being kept in an irregular fashion. Rumor says gluttony, idleness, and indecent familiarity." Eyes slide to Clara as though her shape were theft. A whiskered councilman unrolls a document. "By ordinance," he reads, "this female must return to respectable service in a household chosen by the town until debts are satisfied." He plants a thumb where a line waits for a signature. "We will take her now." Clara's heart hammers, but her feet hold. Shame urges flight, as if retreat could wear nobility's mask. She breathes once and looks at Elias. He meets her gaze, not asking, not commanding, simply present. The quiet steadies her. Elias steps forward. She stays. The words land like a hammer on a clean nail. Murmurs ripple. Holt smiles without humor. You set yourself above the law, he asks. You bought a ranch, and imagine it includes this woman's virtue. Return the servant, and we may forget your presumption. She works here by choice, Elias says. She is not property. He turns his head so both crowd and council must see his face. And she is my equal. Jeers rise like startled crows. Equal, someone yells. With that body. Another shouts odds, making a game of ugliness. Rage floods Clara so hot she tastes metal. Then rain dots dust. Tiny coins striking the yard, and the first cool touch on her wrist feels like a vow from the sky. Holt lifts a hand. Enough noise. We are here to repair decency. He gestures toward the preacher waiting near the fence, Bible clutched in a damp grip. Reverend Price will witness the transfer and set terms. Elias steps off the porch into the yard. He stops within reach of Clara, then faces the town. Hear me, he says, voice widened without a shout. I fought a war and learned what destruction builds, graves and hunger. I came back to drive posts, mend roofs and bring a place to life. This woman has done more honest work beside me than any man who ever spat a joke at her name. Speak of law if you must, but understand this. I choose her, not as possession, but as partner. He takes Clara's hand. Heat flows through calluses, a current made of courage. She trembles yet does not pull away. Rain thickens and smudges the dust. A drop runs down Elias's scar like a silver thread. Clara Hayes, he says, eyes steady on hers, although the whole town watches. Will you marry me and stand here as my equal, with no one to command you but your own heart and God? Shock rolls the crowd like wind through prairie grass. Holt's jaw tightens. A woman near the gate gasps. The boy falls silent. Clara cannot hear the thunder for the pounding inside her chest. She sees the garden's thin green, the straight fence, the aligned door, the ledger waiting for careful numbers, the morning light on a gelding's patient brow. Shame that once ruled her days loosens and falls like a rusted chain. She squeezes his fingers. Yes, she says, voice shaking but clear. Yes, Elias Warren. The preacher blinks, then climbs the step with rain spotting his pages. If you intend vows, we can finish them here. Holt begins a protest, but a murmur moves through the neighbors, an older woman hushing him with a sharp glance that says enough. Thunder answers like a slow drum. Councilmen look at one another, unprepared for a scene they did not script. Elias and Clara stand under the eave as Reverend Price opens his book. Rain slicks the yard, washing away years of spit and grudge. The smell of wet earth rises. Neighbors edge closer, then stop, caught between appetite for scandal and the sense they are inside something solemn. Do you, Elias, take Clara to be your wife? The preacher asks, voice deepening as he finds the path he has walked many times, to build a life together in faithfulness, labor and care. I do. And you, Clara, take Elias to be your husband, to share work, shelter and hope. I do. The words come easier than breath. She feels the truth of them in her hands, in the ache of muscle, in the lift of her spine. Join right hands. They are already joined. Price smiles despite the rain. I pronounce you man and wife. Elias bows his head and kisses her. Not a claim, a promise. The yard exhales. The council stands motionless, plans unmade. Holt scowls, water dripping from his brim. He looks smaller in the downpour, diminished by an act he cannot arrest. Clara faces the crowd. We will keep this place, she says, tone low yet carrying. We will feed our work, not gossip. We will honor decency by making it every day. For a long moment, no one speaks. Then the older woman nods once, decisive. A farmhand at the back says, "Good luck to you," awkward and sincere. One deputy wheels his horse without awaiting orders, ashamed of how far the sheriff's errand wandered from justice. Raindrops strike hats and paper. The ordnance wilts in whiskered fingers, ink bleeding into something unreadable. Holt gathers himself. This changes nothing, he mutters, yet the words lack force. You'll hear from me. He jerks the bay around and splashes through the gate. Council trailing, a sullen wake of bruised reputations. Neighbors scatter in twos and threes, softer now, talking about fence lines, calves and the way a storm scrubs a valley. The boy glances back at Clara with puzzled respect, then hurries after his father. The yard empties. Rain eases from sheets to strings, then to bright beads clinging to wire. Elias turns to her, still holding her hand. The scar on his cheek marks a path the years took, but the set of his mouth has eased. "Mrs. Warren," he says quietly. It lands like an anchor and a wing. She laughs, shaky and joyous, and rain salts her lips. They step into the garden together. Beams lift tips toward trellis lines. Leaves shine deeper green. Mud clings and lets go. Light breaks the cloud bank in bars, gilding the cottonwood, the roof, the clean stones she spread. Clara stands taller than she ever did in any square, equal at last, by vow and by labor. Around them the ranch breathes, alive as if it heard and believed. Morning breaks on a rinsed valley, the light clean on cottonwood leaves and on wire that hums along the straight fence. Clara Warren steps into the yard with a bucket and a ledger tucked under her arm, the new name tasting like spring water after drought. The garden answers with a green so sure it feels like the soil has decided to trust them. Beans climb lines, squash sets lantern blossoms, and lettuce ruffles a low border near the porch. The barn roof holds, bright at the seams. Elias is already out, checking a latch, counting boards, measuring what the day can carry without strain. He meets her at the steps with a brown paper parcel folded tight and tied with twine. He places the bundle in her hands and waits while she works the knot free. Inside lies a pair of gloves cut to a woman's palm, supple and whole, double-stitched where fingers bend and stout where rope will bite. She slides them on. The fit answers a question she had forgotten to ask. He nods once satisfied, and the nod feels like a blessing without ceremony. By mid-morning they walk the perimeter together and let the fence line feel like a vow renewed. Wire sings low. Staples sit firm. A post that leaned in spring now holds true in settled ground. She tests the gate and hears the latch seat with a sound that satisfies an old hunger for reliability. Beyond the fence, the road runs pale toward Dry Creek. Voices out there have softened since the storm wedding, as if rain washed the sharpest edges from certain mouths. The sheriff's hat still appears in town, yet men who once leaned toward his laughter look away. The story that wanted her small has lost its grip. They spend the noon hour on the porch where new trim catches light. Elias sands a stubborn edge while she mends a sleeve with blue thread from her mother's tin. The same thread she used on the day she learned to gentle the gelding. Silence between them has changed. It holds a roomy shape now, like a coat that keeps rain off and leaves both hands free. After a while he speaks with his eyes on the rail. He tells her more of marching winter tents and the quiet after volley fire, a quiet that felt like a mouthful of axe. He says he is done tearing holes and intends to spend whatever time is left on lines that hold. She listens and sets each piece beside what she knows, the way he checks hinges twice, the way he waits for a window to draw before lighting a fire, the way he says, "Eat," with no insult hidden in the word. They eat cold beans and heel bread in the shade, and watch swallows sow air between barn and eave. A wagon rattles far off and fades. Clara opens the ledger to a fresh page and writes 3 small lines that are not inventory. Rain before dawn. Seedlings strong. Heart steady. Then she closes the book because a ledger should carry truth without turning into a diary. Truth also lives in boards, hinges, and seed. Afternoon brings the kind of tasks that together feel like a hymn. She strings flashing ribbon along the far row to keep birds on. He trues the porch step and sinks screws until the wood accepts them as part of itself. She oils the pump handle and wipes away the black that rises like old sorrow before iron agrees to shine. He checks the mare's hoof and praises her patience while Clara holds the halter and rubs a cheek that used to flinch. When the work pauses, they sit again and trade one more story each, small and She tells him how a school teacher once slipped her a slate when coins were short. He tells her how a stranger in a river town mended his boot for free because a man who walks far needs feet that do not fail. Consider what it means to be truly seen, she thinks, watching the way his gaze rests on a job completed rather than on the old shape of her dress. To be seen is to be measured by the work of your hands, the fairness of your count and the steadiness with which you answer wind and weather. To be seen is to have your grief noticed and not used as a weapon. To be seen is to hear someone say, "Eat," when pride would starve you, and to feel that word carry no wound. How can you offer that to someone else? You make room at the table and lay the best knife by their plate. You tell the boy with patched sleeves that his rows are straight. You listen to the widow finish a story without fixing it. You place good gloves on the hands that have done ungloved work for too long. The afternoon wind turns playful. Linen on the line lifts and settles like a chest after tears. Clara carries a pail to the garden and waters around the roots, careful of waste, then pinches weeds with a twist that leaves the soil unshocked. Her body answers the lift and bend with the power she earned. Arms once mocked now haul without complaint. Hips that carried shame now ground her stance when a skittish colt tests the lead. She catches her reflection in the clean window and does not flinch at a blemish or freckle. Strength has changed her posture more than any mirror ever could. Word from town arrives folded into the store bill. The teamster leaves at the gate. The council has returned to fixing the footbridge over Willow Wash, and the sheriff is said to be asking for deference he no longer receives by reflex. A preacher's wife has started a supper for families short on flour, and nobody turns away a heavy girl at that table because the only measure that counts is appetite after work. Gossip still lives because gossip eats for free, but it no longer runs the place. It circles tires and wanders off to hunt smaller game. Toward evening, the valley fills with a breeze that smells of clover and damp stone. The sky wears a hard blue with a thin sash of clouds stretched along the far ridge. Ornament rather than Elias carries a bucket of nails to the shed, returns with 2 mugs of coffee gone cool, and sets one by her elbow. They sit with boots on the step, watching light slide down the posts they set together. A fox crosses the draw, hears nothing worth fear, and continues. The gelding snorts and lowers his head, as if he too approves of quiet. Elias asks if she is satisfied with the day, as if satisfaction were a tool to inspect for cracks. She answers yes and means it without apology. He touches the back of her glove where a seam meets the curve between thumb and finger, checking the stitch like a craftsman who cannot stop himself. The gesture is a gift as quiet as the gloves themselves. She thinks about the girl who stood in a square while laughter tried to write her future, and she blesses that girl for refusing to die inside humiliation. She blesses the stranger who paid 500 and then spent it on posts and roofs instead of pride. She blesses the morning. She believed bread and water were not insults but fuel. Clear air moves across the porch and leaves the taste of pine. Somewhere a bell rings from a distant ranch, calling hands to supper. The sound arrives gently and leaves the Clara leans her shoulder against Elias for a moment, and feels the steady beat under his shirt, a metronome that once kept time through marching, and now keeps time for a home. His hand covers hers, callus to callus, promise to promise. The ranch answers with small testimonies, a hinge that does not squeal, a gate that swings and closes sweet, a row of beans reaching for the line they were offered. Stars will show soon, and they will go in when the first one claims the sky. For now they sit and let the day finish itself. In the calm she tries on the question she asked the air earlier, and turns it outward like a lamp. What will you do, Clara Warren, to let others be seen? I will count fairly. I will call work good when it is good. I will keep hot food near the stove for the rider who arrives late with dust in his teeth. I will hold my shoulders square when a girl like me walks past the porch, and I will nod to her as if we share a trade, because we do. I will speak plainly when men mistake cruelty for order. I will leave plates by the doors without names. I will teach what I know, and I will learn what I do not. Evening settles. The cottonwood writes black script against a sky rinsed of storm. Crickets try a thin chorus near the ditch, and then commit. The lamp inside waits with a small circle of gold. The ledger waits for one last line. She writes it before they go in. Fences sound, garden bold, love working. Then she closes the book, takes Elias's arm and steps through a doorway that smells of soap and pine, and something new that deserves the simplest word they own: home. Golden light settles over the valley, and the ranch answers like a chest released from a long-held breath. Fences stand true, the gate closes with a friendly click, and the cottonwood shines like a clean coin against a wide Montana sky. Clara Warren carries water along neat rows where beans climb, squash bloom, and lettuce tosses frills that catch the day. Her hands, once raw, now wear earned strength. Calluses fit tools the way truth fits a plain sentence. She walks tall across ground that once swallowed courage and now returns it, step for step, because partnership has taught the dirt a new language and taught her body to believe it. Elias steps from the barn with a wrapped bundle. He sets it in her palms and waits. Inside lie gloves cut for her, supple but stout, double-stitched where rope will bite. She pulls them on, flexes and smiles without apology. His scar catches the sun, not as a wound, but as a mark that has learned to live. He smiles back, easier than he did in spring. A roof that does not leak, and a ledger written fairly, have taught him rest. They stand a moment in that small, good quiet, only earned by hands that kept faith when the sky would not. Work keeps its rhythm. He sketches a smokehouse near the garden, and a winter stall that will hold warmth without wasting wood. She lays out an herb bed and a line for sunflowers, so seed can be saved and birds kept honest. Plans live on steps, not wishes. Boards after the next calf sells, stone after the far gate is mended. A new well cap once harvest is in. Nothing boasts, everything builds. The ranch wears intention like a well-cut coat. Neighbors begin to pause at the gate without shame. A widow trades flour for help with a sick heifer. A boy learns to set a post without splitting grain. A tinker smooths dents from a pot and leaves talk of rain 2 valleys east. Clara keeps stew warm on the back of the stove and sets out the good knife even when no one is due. People go on lighter. Dry Creek remembers kinder speech. The garden sings. Bees dust themselves gold. Leaves clap in little winds. Water ticks from pump to bucket and runs in bright threads through furrows. Tomatoes blush. Barley wakes in the field they reclaimed from weed. Leather is oiled and placed where night hands can find it. Tools hang in rows that teach order to anyone who looks twice. The barn smells of straw, oil, and honest use. On Sundays they sit on the porch and let time widen. They talk about a bunkhouse for hired hands, a second well upslope, a broad step where children, should they come, might sit with biscuits and watch snow drift through branches. Elias says time once felt like a march, and now feels like a field. Clara says the mirror is no longer an enemy, because it shows a body built by work, not rumor. They share bread, laugh at the gelding nosing for carrot ends, and watch swallows sow air between barn and eave. Word of Sheriff Holt fades the way sound fades when respect withdraws. After the rainy wedding he tried to gather strength, but men who once chased his grin turned to bridges and ditches, where authority does some good. He rides past now and then out of habit, counts calves, notes straight wire, and keeps moving. His shadow does not reach this port. Gossip, missing its host, grows bored and wanders. Late light brings small joys. Clara picks beans that squeak and slices squash into thin moons to dry. Elias files a nick from the axe until metal sings a clean note. 2 hawks ride the blue and never touch. A fox crosses the draw with its own business. The ranch breathes whether they speak or not. At harvest's edge, they stand in the field they reopened. Barley lifts in pale waves. Wind runs 1,000 hands through it, and the heads lean in long phrases that sound like a promise. Clara rests her wrist on Elias's shoulder and feels settled strength there. He covers her knuckles as if naming the callus with thanks. No words are needed. Sun slides lower. The cottonwood throws a grand, generous shade. In town, a woman who once snickered now nods with real regard. The preacher's wife asks Clara to save seed for households not yet named. The storekeeper keeps a crate by the back wall, where neighbors can leave what they can spare and take what they need. No ledgers, no looks. Stories change when people adjust their posture. Dry Creek lifts its head. Nights arrive early as the season tilts. They cook, eat, wash and sit with warm mugs. Elias reads about irrigation learned at a meeting downriver. Clara copies notes in a steady hand and marks a page to revisit. When frost lets go, they set the lamp low and sleep without watching. Rain remembers them and comes when asked. Winter plans gather on the porch table like good maps. They list repairs along the north fence where frost will heave, a shallow trench to carry runoff past tender roots, and stout shelves for jars that will hold summer under sealed lids. Clara sketches an evening school for children who trail chores at dusk. Letters by lantern, numbers counted with beans, history told with quiet pride. The spare room once used for sorrow will host that life. Elias shapes plank benches, smooth as river stones, and planes their edges, so small legs will not snag. He lays out a simple set of rules for tools. Hang what you borrow, wipe what you use, thank the hand that taught you. Neighbors hear and nod. A ranch that once begged now invites. A life that once defended itself now extends welcome. The invitation feels like a second harvest, no less real than grain in the bin. All of this rose from a laugh in a square and from a hand that did not drop when eyes turned cruel. If your day carries a weight someone else placed on you, read the proof in this small place, with strong rows and clean hinges. Your worth belongs to you. Do not give it to any voice that points and jeers. Choose your work. Choose your company. Take one step toward the fence line that needs you. See your story to someone who will treat it like a seed, not gossip. We are building more than a home. We are laying a legacy of steady days that make room for the next person to stand. Come take part. Share this story with a friend who needs courage. Subscribe so you do not miss the next chapter of grit becoming grace. Add your voice, bring your memory, help prove to this valley and to valleys like it that dignity grows in rows, love is labor, and every kind hand can plant a future larger than its reach. Do not let anyone define your worth. Join our community, share your story and inspire others to rise above judgment. Be part of something bigger with us, and help the next rider at the gate find the courage to step down and step.